Have you ever burned a pot of beans? It smells like cigarettes. It makes your house smell like a nightclub. It makes people think you're having a lot more fun than just cooking beans. You walk in the house like, smells like Saturday night. No, it's just beans, just beans. I've got a lot of dang beans in my refrigerator now. That's not a bad thing, it's a wonderful thing, it's wonderful. Beans are great too because you can freeze them. I usually have a couple of plastic tubs of beans in the freezer because you never know when you're gonna have some sort of bean emergency and they're there for you. That's a good thing. It's always nice to find them in the freezer, because it saves you a few hours. It saves you several hours of cooking. I do have bean emergencies, I really do. What does a bean emergency look like? Well, that's when you have no beans. That's an emergency. Hey y'all, I'm Melissa Guerra. I am the Kitchen Wrangler, and today we're gonna be talking about beans and what is the best way to cook them. Should you use an Instapot or should you just use a regular pot? I cook beans, I'd say once a week, twice a week. I cook them all the time, and I use both the Instapot and a regular pot. So I thought I would give you a comparison. Before we get started, I wanted to show you how to make beans from scratch. There's some things that you have to do no matter whether you're using an Instapot or a regular pot. You first have to sort your beans because sometimes there'll be little rocks or pebbles or little clods of dirt or little pieces of grass. You have to sort all that out. This is my very quick method of sorting beans. I pour the beans onto a table and then I lay them out in a single layer and I sort through very, very quickly, and I scoop the beans into a colander that I'm holding on my lap. Now it takes all of about, I'd say, a minute, 30 seconds. It doesn't take very long. It's a very quick process. After the beans are sorted, we're going to rinse the beans. We're testing a regular pot and an Instapot. For both pots, we're doing exactly the same thing. We're using 1 pound of beans, 500 grams of beans, of dried pinto beans, and we're going to add onions and tomatoes and a chile to one of them. These are vegetarian beans, so we're gonna keep it very, very simple. Once the beans are rinsed, now we can add them to the pot. Let's start with the Instapot first. Just put them in the Instapot. We're gonna add tomatoes and onions and enough water so it's right below the half mark. We're gonna add a couple of cloves of garlic as well. We're gonna pop on the lid and set it for beans. The bean program on the Instapot takes 45 minutes and it'll need another 30 minutes so the pressure can naturally release. So that's a total of what, an hour and 15 minutes? So it's incredibly quick. So that's a pro for the Instapot. Another pro for the Instapot is that it's set it and forget it. Once you have the beans in the pot, you are done. You can walk away and you can set it to keep the beans warm after they've cooked and after the pressure has naturally released. You can also do a quick release of the pressure after the beans are cooked to reduce your cooking time even more. Another pro Instapot consideration is that you don't need to soak the beans overnight to reduce the cooking time. It's an Instapot. It's really fast. Some of the cons with the Instapot when you're cooking beans are the rubber gasket that the Instapot uses. It can pick up aromas from the garlic and the beans, and sometimes those aromas can linger. You can soak it in a little bit of water with a little bit of Clorox in there to get the smell out, but that has been something that I've noticed. Another con on the Instapot is that you can't check it while it's cooking. I'm always messing with food, and I really do like to check on my beans while they're cooking. Do they need more tomatoes? Do they need maybe a little bit more salt? What do they need? But you can't do that with an Instapot. You have to wait till it's finished. The other con with an Instapot is that there is kind of a learning curve on how to use an Instapot. You have to read the instruction manual, you have to watch a few videos, but after a while you get it. It's not too hard, but sometimes you just don't feel like messing with an extra electric appliance in your kitchen. So let's use a regular old pot. You might say, well, what kind of pot? I've heard clay pots are really great for beans, and let me show you my clay pot. This is my Spanish clay pot, and I have used it quite a bit over the years, so much so that I broke the lid. Oops. Clay pots are really, really great for cooking beans. It's almost like a jacuzzi for your beans. Clay is an insulator, not a conductor. When we were in 3rd grade science class, we learned that metal conducts heat. Well, clay does not conduct heat. It insulates and holds in heat. So it takes a little bit longer for it to heat up. And once it does heat up, then it delivers a very gentle heat to the beans. That's all terrific. But there is some concern about the way clay pots are made. They can have a small amount of lead in them, which is objectionable for obvious reasons. Ceramic pots, even so, there's still some question as to the levels of lead in some of the finishes, especially if you have a vintage antique pot. I used to sell them. I can't really recommend them though, because there is always that nagging question out there, does it have lead? This one that I have is one that I used to sell, and this one was cleared by the European Union as being good for food use. Not every clay pot is good for food use, especially those vintage pots. So keep that in mind. There's no real way to tell if a pot is good for food use. In California, they have very strict rules about the clay pots and how they are sold. So I would steer clear of them if you have any objections or fears about them. There's no real need to be using a clay pot. If you use a crock pot, there is a ceramic interior pot and it is covered with a vitreous glaze. And that vitreous just means it's like glass. So it's safe, it's fine. I mean, your crock pot is absolutely fine. But this is a clay pot that has been made with a type of clay, which is mud. You know, it just naturally has a little bit of lead in it. So your real choice when you're using a pot to cook beans is a stainless steel pot. And make sure that it's a nice, heavy pot, because beans will burn. If you're using a thin aluminum or enameled pot, the walls of it are not thick enough to help the bean not burn. Does that make sense? It has to have a thicker metal bottom and side to keep it a little bit more insulated. Even though metal is a conductor, those thicker metals do offer a little bit more insulation. To make the beans in the regular pot, we're going to just simply add the beans to the pot, cover them with water, add some tomatoes, some onions, and to this pot, I'm going to add a whole chile. Now, you can add chopped chiles as well, but that will make the beans a lot spicier. If you leave the chile whole, it'll give some nice flavor, but not a lot of spice. So I usually just toss them in whole. Oh, and don't forget, add garlic. So the pros for using a regular pot, and a regular pot meaning a stainless steel pot, is one, you can stir and check on your beans as you go along. You know me, I'm nosy, I want to see what's going on in the pot. The second pro consideration for a regular pot is you really don't have a limit on the amount of beans you can cook. Now I know we are doing 1 pound of beans for the regular pot and for the Instapot, but the Instapot has a maximum capacity. If you get a larger regular pot, you can cook as many beans as you want. I don't really know of a commercial size Instapot. If you have to feed a large amount of people and you have a really big pot, that is the way to go. The third pro consideration for using a regular pot is I like the texture better. The Instapot, I think, makes the beans just a little bit tougher and it's not as brothy, not as much starch releases from the beans. So I think the regular pot has a little bit better texture, but that is me. The con considerations for a regular pot is it's a little messy. You've got the lid is all over the place. There's stuff popping out of there. There's steam. It's just messier. Another con consideration is there's more aroma. Now, if you don't want your house smelling like beans, maybe a regular pot isn't the way to go. And the third con consideration for a regular pot is, oh yes, those beans can burn. If you're not watching them, if the water level goes too low, you're gonna end up with a burnt batch of beans, which is almost impossible in an Instapot because since it's sealed, all of the water stays in there. It never evaporates. So you're pretty much guaranteed a nice batch of beans in the Instapot. So let's take a look at the beans now that they're cooked. The ones from the Instapot look a little bit redder and they have a little bit deeper color, but they look pretty similar to the ones that came from the regular pot. Although I will say that I've eaten both and the ones from the regular pot do have a little bit better texture. So you just have to select the method that works the best for your life. Sometimes I use the Instapot because I'm in a hurry, and sometimes I have a lot of people coming over to the house, and so I make a huge batch of beans in a regular pot because I need a huge batch of beans. Well, that's it for our bean comparison. I'm I've got a lot of beans to eat. These look so good. Yum. I'm so glad that you could join me today. Don't forget, you can always email me your questions or requests at help@kitchenwrangler.com or message me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or here on YouTube. I'm Melissa Guerra. I am the Kitchen Wrangler, and I'm looking forward to seeing you here at the ranch again soon. Bye now.